All right, hi. This is I'm here with GHScanner, and we are going to be interviewing and talking with candidate for sheriff.
Ed Welter.
There we go, Ed Welter. I drew a blank all of a sudden on that one. I don't know why. We're checking with Ed here. You know, we know a lot about Sheriff Wallace and stuff, and we've worked with him over the last 4 years and stuff. And Ed is currently running for county sheriff this year, and wanted to give a chance to give a shout out and see, what are you all about and stuff. So, let's tell yourself, about a little bit about yourself and why you want to run for Grace Harbor County Sheriff.
Yeah, just briefly about me. I uh, I started my educational background comes from Pacific Lutheran University. I graduated with a degree in economics. During my time in college, I had an opportunity to go do some work in some other countries. So I did land repatriation research in Namibia, and that gave me a really unique perspective on things like property rights and
Okay.
how those things affect a community and affect a culture and a country. So how does that relate to me twisting all the way around to being a police officer? So I have seen firsthand. I've traveled through and lived in about 14 countries that would be considered, impoverished. I spent a lot of time and have friends there still. A key component in a flourishing society and a flourishing economy is the public's trust in property rights and law enforcement. And that is something that I have yet to forget. It is imperative that there be a continued trust that the public knows that the laws and the ordinances and the constitutional rights bestowed upon them by their vote and by their representatives is going to be truly enforced by their law enforcement. Uh, After college, I started my professional career mostly in telecom. I built business models and did business analysis for various companies and various projects. One of the largest one, I was in charge of about an $18 million capital expenditure budget with a $17 million operating budget. We were building a voice over IP platform. It was a really interesting project. Moved on from that after I realized I couldn't sit behind a desk, and I really did feel a need to serve. I joined the U.S. Coast Guard. Did 4 years there, and I was very fortunate. At the end of my 4 years, I was given an opportunity to come back to Westport, where I owned a home here. I bought my house in '07, and I grew up coming out here and surfing. And it's always been a goal of mine to make this my home. Ever since I can remember as a little kid, I wanted to live in Westport. It's a very, very important, very special place to me. So when I got an opportunity to come back in the Coast Guard and stand watch over the Grace Harbor Bar, it was really important to me. I really felt like I kind of got to come back home. I was standing watch over guys that I had grown up and spent a lot of time surfing with, and knew a lot of them from the fishing fleet, and I took a lot of pride in that. And then that extended. I got out of the Coast Guard and started with Fish and Wildlife, and I was assigned as the Westport officer. And that sort of sense of community and just real pride in being the one that stood watch over it just continued. And then after that, I lateraled to the sheriff's office, and I was a resident deputy. Really enjoyed that time. I really got to know everybody in my area. I really enjoyed having that sort of assigned area of it is your responsibility and your community to watch over. And I want an opportunity to be the guy that stands watch over the entire county and represents this community and the safety of this community. After being as a resident deputy, I was also a narcotics canine handler, and I've been promoted now to permanent detective with the county, where I work a lot with crimes against persons and major burglaries and things like that. I don't want to get into particular
Right.
cases and things
Right.
like that.
No, yeah, no.
But yeah, that's the gist of who I am. I'm raising my family. I have a young daughter, and this is our home, and it's going to be our home for the foreseeable future.
So why now? Why have you decided now is a good time to run for sheriff?
Well, there's this thing called a filing period.
Okay. Well, now is that, yeah.
Yeah. No, I really feel that we need more community engagement from the sheriff's office. We have moved into a time where police agencies, sheriff's offices cannot operate in a vacuum. We need to have community engagement. And also, I feel I've learned this as the mayor of Westport, that this is a relatively unrepresented community. And as mayor, I've worked very, very hard to retain federal grants. I have worked with lobbyists, local groups for letters of support for multiple projects. And I really feel that we deserve representation at the state level. So as mayor, I worked with Mr. Theringer on House Bill 1806. I've also worked with Senator Wilson to receive a $250,000 of direct spend out of the capital budget for the city of Westport for water main improvements. I have worked to retain the about $14 million brick funding for the tsunami tower, and I've worked very hard to push that project forward. We'll have a groundbreaking coming up, we think, around July. We're crossing our fingers. We got a very tight time frame on that.
Oh,
I've also worked to bring a offshore fiber optic cable landing to the city of Westport, which is going to bring a couple dozen high-tech jobs and security jobs to the city, into the area. And then from the perspective of community safety, that also, because it will be a government cable, is going to increase kind of where we stand during public disaster to get relief. There will be a higher government interest in keeping that infrastructure running and up and running during any type of a disaster. Worked with private industry to develop land leases that help subsidize our general fund so that we can keep taxes low for our citizens. Now, those are the kind of things that I think, as an elected official, it's very important for you to be public with your constituents and be fighting for the funding your constituents deserve, and be fighting at the state level or the highest level possible to make sure that laws, ordinances, and policies are put in place that are supported by your citizens.
That's good.
As a mayor, you sit in multiple public meetings. The sheriff is unique in that there are no required public meetings. Commissioners come to meetings, mayors, council members, fire commissioners, judges show up to court. As the sheriff, I would act as I expect the police chief of a city to act, which is to constantly attend commissioners meetings. You know, the commissioners are the ones that are elected by the public to direct a majority of public funds. As an elected official, you need to have public input and then direct that input into where public resources go. And so it's very important that you work closely with your commission so that they understand your budgetary needs, your staffing needs, and understand what you're doing for the community and how you're doing it.
What would be like some of your top priorities if you were to get elected sheriff? What would be like maybe the top 2 or 3 priorities that you'd be looking at?
Sheriff's office engagement. Like I said, we can't act in a silo, and right now we need to work with the community and work with the state to get funding, because we have got to figure out how to build a better, safer jail. A better, safer jail not only for our employees, but for the individuals who find themselves incarcerated and in need of those types of services. And we need to figure out how to build a better, safer squadron for our patrol. You talk about morale, right? A majority of the time of your life you spend at work, and when you walk into where you work, you should feel a sense of pride and ownership. And so that kind of goes into the next priority that I have, is I really think we need to empower deputies as much as citizens. And by deputies, I mean corrections deputies and patrol deputies, to help build the sheriff's office that they all want and that the citizens want. You know, we have a lot of very smart people that work at the sheriff's office, and we need to listen to their ideas and promote them and roll that into how we do business. And then obviously public safety and community are huge for me.
Right. So many agencies struggle with recruiting and retention. Is that part of that deal of the morale? And then
so speaking of staffing, I was looking at the historic staffing levels for the sheriff's office. If you look at the population of unincorporated Grace Harbor County, which is what the sheriff's office is intended to be serving, right? It's increased by 30% since the 2000s. The staffing level of the sheriff's office has gone down by 1. You know, so we went from operating at a ratio of 1.5 officers, I'm rounding, 1.5 officers to 1,000 citizens, to 1 officer per 1,000 citizens. The national average is 2.5 officers per 1,000 citizens. You know, I know we are at a budget crisis right now, but we have got to figure out how to increase staffing in positions.
What type? So this is kind of a really interesting one, which is like, what type of leadership style do you think that you could bring to the office and stuff that you're looking to bring in? We see a lot of surrounding agencies doing all kinds of different things, from being a desk person to being a meeting person to being a person that's a little bit of both, a little bit of everything. What kind of leadership style do you think you're going to be bringing to if elected?
I want to empower everybody that works for the sheriff's office to know that they have a voice. The same way I want to empower the citizens to know they have a voice in the type of law enforcement they want in their community. When I got elected mayor, I sat down with all the department heads and I asked each one of them individually. I said, what do you need me to do as the elected official to improve your life? Like what project is the most important thing for you that you want me to go get done? I had that conversation with streets, sewer, and water, and police agencies, and they all gave me a task, and I'm very happy to say that I've accomplished two of the three. One of them is a continued process for water rights, which is involving Department of Ecology and Fish and Wildlife, but it's something that I have continued to work on and not let go of because it's a priority of the staff.
Yeah. And as we're talking about with community relations and stuff, and you kind of touched on that a little bit here and stuff, one of the key topics that community members look at and stuff is, transparency, sharing of information and stuff like that. What is your take on that?
I think it's extremely important. So an individual police officer out on the street has the power to take away your right to freedom based on their investigations. That is something that was mentioned, or it was really driven home when I was in the police academy, that individual officer has more rights or more authority than the president of the United States out on the street. And you have got to have public trust. You have got to have public trust if you're going to have people walking around doing that. So public engagement is extremely important. Block watch groups and community groups. As sheriff, I would attend block watch groups. I think it's extremely important that if you are the elected official who has been tasked with holding the tone and cadence of law enforcement within the county, that you be the one that shows up and receives that.
Sounds good. Okay. So you talked about being able to working with budgets and high profile programs and stuff like that and stuff. Is there something that's like really thinking that's really important that you'd be focusing on funding for the department?
The giant elephant in the room, right, is the jail. Everybody has been talking about the jail. So the property for the jail was purchased by the prior administration. I would really like to figure out how we're going to work with the commissioners in the state to seek funding for that jail. We have to give some credit to the firefighters. Firefighters do a very good job of community outreach when they need to build a new fire station. And the sheriff's office is going to have to figure out how to take a note from that. If you're going to go out and ask the public for bonds for millions of dollars, they're going to need to see the conceptual designs. They're going to need to see all the public benefit for that if we're going to get that vote and get that funding.
Right. And along the kind of the budget and spending ideas and stuff, I know that the sheriff's department is already on a really short budget and stuff like that. Are there any places that you could think that would be able to be cut without spending, or is it just still a balance game?
I wish I had enough information to answer that question.
Okay.
But what I will say is this. So I attended a economics lecture, and they talked about American Airlines back in the day. They were trying to figure out how we're going to cut costs. And they talked about how they put lettuce. One of the newest employees talked about how they put lettuce on all the plates, but nobody ever eats the lettuce. So they stopped putting lettuce on the plates, and they saved millions of dollars. There's always going to be those little things that you can do that will be a massive savings. But you're going to have to talk to every single person. Every person's going to need that voice to talk about how we're going to do that. Like I said, we have a lot of very smart people that work for the sheriff's office, all the way up and down at every level, and we need to listen to their ideas.
Okay. So, talking about community trust and stuff, if someone's lost their trust in the sheriff's department or even any of our local law enforcement stuff, what is something that you could tell them to restore that, or what you can feel that we can be doing better?
We touched on it earlier. I think the community outreach and the block watches are very important. I think it's important for us to try and figure out how to do youth engagement programs. Grace Harbor County we have a drug problem. We have a housing problem. We're no one agency, be it a law enforcement agency or a community outreach agency, no one group is going to fix those problems. So we've got to figure out how to engage with people early on and figure out, invite them to the table. I've had a friend as a kindergarten teacher, and she's had me come and read to her class. Just simple things like that, so that people get used to seeing police officers in areas where it's not enforcement. It's just out and it's community engagement.
Would that be the kind of the same thing that you would probably think that would be for like, we have like you said, a large youth drug and crime problem as well in some areas of the county. Would that be about the same thing, kind of along the same lines, community outreach and stuff like that? Do you miss Dare? I mean, I just thought I would bring it up.
Oh, I remember. I was a Dare kid.
I mean, Mason County, I think, has got a couple of DARE programs that they restarted back up, and some of the areas that have been really facing that. And I grew up in those days and stuff like that. And some people say that was just a failure of a program, but then again,
some people say that DARE taught kids how to use drugs. Some people think that it worked really well at keeping kids off drugs.
Right.
And then you get into the funding issues of DARE. That's a rabbit hole, but I think DARE had some good points to it, and I think one of them was that kids got to see officers, in non-enforcement capacities. I don't think that the sheriff's office is going to have an ability to have RSOs again, or student resource officers, SROs.
Yeah.
But it was something that has been talked about, and you don't have to have a dedicated student resource officer to have a deputy spend time going to community events or going to schools.
So, we've talked about all kinds of different budgets and stuff like that, and communications and community outreach. What is one of your thoughts on communications during an emergency event, reaching out to the public, stuff that we could use to do that with?
So, county emergency management does a really good job. The city of Westport, we've actually implemented a texting program where you'll receive texts based on, if you live in the city and things like that. But, something that's really important is people use social media. And an example of how I would interact with the public during a disaster event, I think, is what I did during the last tsunami threat. I did hourly updates to the public in video form on Facebook. And I was shocked at how many people that reached. I think it's important that when you do that messaging that you direct people to the official channels and the official information. But during times of disaster, it's very, very important that people see the information and you engage with them directly as the elected official. And that's why I chose to do hourly video updates. So if there is any types of emergencies or incidents or critical incidences within the county, if I am the sheriff, you will see me out there explaining it to the people. That way you're getting it direct, and you have the information and you know where to get more information.
Sounds good. Okay, and let's see. My last topic that I had here, we talked about community engagement. What do you have coming up that's part of your campaign?
I'm going to be in 2 parades this weekend. So I'll be in the Oakville Parade. I'll be in the Pirate Days Parade. I'm looking for anywhere that I could be invited to come and meet with groups of citizens. I'm working on putting up some public engagements and some meet and greets. So I will roll those out as I get venues scheduled.
All right. I really appreciate that you took time to sit down and talk with us today. My battery is about ready to run out of my camera, oddly. Technical difficulty. Anyways, anything else you'd like to add that we're missing?
Thank you very much for the time, and I really truly believe in the community engagement, and I want to be available and get to know everybody. So I'm trying to make sure that I personally deliver all of my signs, and I answer the phones and the emails myself. So if you have questions or you want a sign, please reach out.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.